I'm so freaked out at the man's words I opened my mouth wide. You've been watching it all? My face is hotter than ever. At the same time, the sudden gust of stone wind and the husky voice from the piece of cloth floated up the astonishment of the earlier. Well, today, animal communion magic is possible because I can also feel the 5 senses of animals in a strange way. But inanimate objects are impossible. Anyway, when he first sent the rabbit, it showed all the reactions. I couldn't tell whether to laugh or cry at his words. I was thinking about how to give it to you less surprised, and then I came up with a towel that was magic. I'm counting on the remaining mana, but I'm glad it was delivered well. There was only one bizarre thing about a handkerchief that lifted its head and made the sound of a man's throat. But if I take it out of my mouth, it's like I'm confessing with my own mouth that I'm terribly surprised and screaming a pack. I became solemn for a while and soon said, "So by the way, I'm going to giving this back." I carefully took out a rabbit-shaped handkerchief. Fortunately, the shape was not disturbed or pressed because of the instantaneous movement. As I slipped out onto the table, Winter remained silent for a while. He only looked down at the handkerchief. I was a little surprised to see him like that's what he looked like. I said without hesitation, "I hope to keep in touch with you through correspondence as much as possible. If you keep in touch like this every time, my heart will be burst." Vinter, who heard me, slowly raised his head. The dark blue eyes, which was revealed again, shook shallowly. "That's what I'm saying. You're thinking of signing a contract with me. Can I take it?" I was puzzled by his words. "Then you're here to sign a contract. Why would I come here myself? Ask point blank before you talk about the contract." I talked straight to the point. "How did you know I was the owner of an emerald mine?" When I asked my direct question, eyes slowly expanded through the visible gap. Suspicion was a bit of an example, but no matter how much I thought about it, I was reluctant. "By any chance have you been prying after me? Or I don't think I've been bugging you with this. I guess it's you, right? Do you mean eavesdropping?" Vinter stammered to the fact, and showed this bewilderment that had never seen before. I was like, "Is that too much? But I had better get this straight." "My God, lady," said Vinter, but with a lamentable sigh he touched my forehead. "There's no magic left here for the delicate magic of eavesdropping. Look," he said, tapping the rabbit in the ring of his hand. "And then just a moment ago it stays in shape." The rabbit fell like a lie and turned into a crumpled handkerchief. Today's message was barely delivered using the wave of mana. "Didn't you hear a lot of noise when I was delivering?" "I heard." I was silent. "In addition, eavesdropping is a criminal act. If you have any doubts, you can go back and check with the family wizard." The blistering blister looked really unfair. The setting of a suspicious and eccentric wizard seemed to be not that crazy. "It's okay if it's not," I replied with a slightly embarrassed look. Then this time, beyond the rabbit mask, the man's eyes became limp. "Since last time you seem to think this place is connected to some dark magic." "It's just a plain information, lady. I didn't do anything wrong." I felt so transparently caught in my stomach that I was in a hurry to calm myself down with a cough. "Ladies, mine is about half a shot." Instead of me staring at a distant, Vinter calmly opened his mouth to solve my curiosity. "When I met your father at the hunting competition, he was proud to hear that the gemstones of high quality poured out of the emerald mine in the southeastern part of the country." I frowned to that remark. The Duke. In retrospect, the Duke and the Winter were in a friendly manner at the hunt ceremony. It occurred to me that they were having a conversation. "Are they close?" Vinter tilted his head, and Vinter calmly continued. "Of course, I thought it would be processed through the wizards in the family, but after a while, I came back and forth from the auction house and saw one of the household butler who seemed to be looking for the top, and I assumed that the owner had changed. If you were a father or any of your brothers, I won't put others first." He said he saw the butler who was working as my agent and was aware of it. I was purely astonished at his eye-stabbing. It should be a high-ranking aristocrat who has ties with the Duke enough to know the face of the butler. It was information that was never known at the top. At the same time as the late master, it's either the widow who runs the reward, or the possible pendulum. At his credible answer I nodded and asked the next question. "But why me? I wonder why you're signing a contract with my mine, because it doesn't handle jewelry either." Actually, this was what I was really curious about. Why not me but rather leave it first? Are you looking for it? He sweetened his lip. I think the return ended with one exchange. I was also surprised by his usual excuse, so I quickly blocked him. At that moment from beyond the mask, a small laugh that seemed to be smiling and blow away came out. Lady, you're really slow at figures. I slowly opened my eyes wide at his words. The Marquis is really good at figures every time. Because it was what I said to him the other day while he was giving me a reply. Maybe it's because we've been talking half-hidden each time. Every time Vinter and I seem to quote each other properly, and return each other's words. But it didn't feel very unpleasant. As the realization ran through my head, I felt really strange. I don't know if he'll come and kill me, but when I met him, there was an open alarm about him. Is Vince also treating me with a very fat attitude? My head got complicated. I'm going to look at the rabbit mask and think about it. Around the time may I speak to you bluntly then? Suddenly he stared straight at me. Because I'm interested in you. I understood that word a step later. What kind of person you are, what kinds of thoughts and what values do I have? I was wondering what kind of you would look like if you acted like this. But all I could use to make contact with Lady is a contract with the award board. When he finished speaking neatly, my eyes had already taken off his navy blue eyes and headed over the top of his head. A vivid purple gauge bar. What is it? Is purple the color of love? I was dull of dating, but it was not to the point that I could not tell that a crush on a Clyde with a dark red color or a pale pink-colored muzzle. But even though I don't know what color means, isn't it too much to say purple is love? Or just pervert? A chilling thought struck me, so I groped back. Well, that's why. Are you curious? I'm a person who collects information, buys and sells it. Vinter answered without hesitation, as if he were preparing. I thought you knew a lot about people, but I still don't know what kind of person you are. The more I heard his answer, the more I only added to the confusion. Because I couldn't tell what kind of man he was. I asked with a face that I couldn't understand. What if you find out? Is there anything different? Maybe not. It was an ambiguous answer. He added that it was very soon. Wizard men are curious people. I'm not picky about water to satisfy that curiosity. Even if it's not this top contract, I heard that you would not be picky to find out how I was picked up. I frowned. Is it a threat I propose? The tail of the eyes bent obnoxiously. I burst out laughing with astonishment. Fortunately, he returned to the main subject after a ridiculous excuse. I didn't touch the jewels because they could easily occupy the market. There is no sorcerer in the Empire who can carve magic as powerful as I can on the gemstone to be sure that there was little chance of failure during the processing. It was a great confidence. I looked back at him with astonishment. The more pure minerals, the more difficult it becomes to carve magic. This is because there was a high probability that minerals would be denatured or broken during processing. So even if the wizard finds the top to which it belongs and signs a contract, it does not immediately lead to the start of sales. It's a shortcut to bankruptcy if all the stones that were mined are broken. But as if I didn't know such a thing, Vinter spoke out in a very dignified manner. If you leave the raw stone processing and distribution to me, you'll get the best return in a short period of time, faster than any other top. So leave it to me, lady. There was an unknown light on the navy blue iris staring at me. I'm the one who came to persuade him to sign a secret contract after much consideration. From the look of it now, I heard Rum begging you to sign this contract. Why? I was once again wrapped up in meaningless emotion. With a ridiculous curiosity of his that really wants to know who I am, I couldn't believe it was because of it. I glanced at him with thin eyes. You already met me and asked when it would be good to return it to you. Even so, there was nothing I could do right away. Whatever the blanks, it hasn't changed that this is one of countless routes. Besides, I need a contract with him, so was I. I'll go ahead with the contract for the emerald mine. I pushed my doubts and answered his proposal in a gentle manner. Then I suddenly felt unfair and twisted my mouth. You've already scared the auction house so that you can't even sign with another top anyway. Haha, I was awkward when his eyes fell on me. A smile fell on me. But you should talk to the butler about it. That's not what I saw. I drew a straight line. I came here today without sending a butler, not a contract for an emerald mine, but a personal request. Vinter looked at me with curious eyes. I took out what I had brought from my arms and put it on the table. This is my own diamond mine, I said, shoving the white envelope toward him. The eyes of the empty space visible through the crevice of the mask were filled with surprise this time. Diamond, I've been thinking about how to roll this. I've been working on the whole process of distribution, processing and sales, starting with mining. I need a wire agent. I'd like you to sign a separate contract for this with me. He looked at the white envelope I had put out with a hint of bewilderment. While talking about emeralds, the diamonds suddenly popped out, and he deserved to confuse, but no matter how much I think about it, this was the best way. Now that Derek knows about Emerald, the mine could not be regarded as my intact private property. The butler was the one who managed the books. I'm not a luxury, but if you repeat a situation where a lot of money suddenly breaks down in the air, you'll notice that it's weird right away. Duke, secretly accumulate my slush funds, and at the same time, I'd publicly intertwine with Vinter, who is going to know when to replace a princess. The person in close relationship in the contract, he won't be as hard on fake princess as he is in normal mode. Without knowing my calculations, Vinter's sight soon quenched and calmly asked, looking perplexed, "What should I do about the family gods?" "No one in the family knows that I have this," I answered with a slight death of my voice. As much as he said he had a lot of knowledge and doubts, I decided to take advantage of it in reversely. "You know my place in the house too." I stretched out my hand and crouched the end of the white envelope. "This is my slush fund, my life-saving guy. In fact, it's just to be a billionaire and open up his favor. But wouldn't it work better to look like the sad foot-dragging of a ball of only name than an ambitious aristocrat?" He looked up and looked at the blank space. He was wearing a mask, so I had no idea what he was thinking. However, his eyes did not miss the moment when he heard the word "live for life." To me, not only the diamond mining business Vinter, but also the person who will keep and manage the money from it. "It's a requirement. You're the one who'll sign it. I'll pay you 60% of the total revenue instead." It was an unconventional offer. The nobleman took more than 6 or more, but he did not give them to the top, who was only a servant. That was good. Perfect. When I saw the eyes of the empty space swaying endlessly, I foretold that my appeal had worked. As he listened to my story without a word, he opened his mouth. "Lady," said to me, "are you afraid to trust me completely now?" It wasn't a word of permission, it was a draft. I fell into a daze. "Trust? Why are you suddenly talking about it?" Looking at the empty space. "I'm happy to pay back what I owe, lady. Trust definitely restored. So are you going to find me again?" "We are going to meet again. Will there be?" I remembered the conversation I had with him before. At that time I acted as if I would never see him again, and it was acceptable for him to come here for a personal request. "You have a good memory. Did you still remember that and care?" But sadly, between him and me, there will never be a build-up of trust. How did you trust a man who might bring her here and mess me? The strange feelings I had heard for a moment slowly subsided, and finally dried up. There was nothing I could trust, not only in Vinter but also in this game. But I couldn't speak so plainly, so I grinned and put myself in moderation. "It's more like trusting the Marquis than you. I got slush funds and his identity. We had each other's weaknesses and we trusted it." The shaking eyes of Vinter stopped. "There is a condition." "What are the conditions?" "I'd like to make a few meetings a requirement to satisfy my curiosity." "Meeting?" I asked back as if I had heard something strange. Vinter nodded firmly. "Yes, instead I'll take only 30% of it, not 60%. I thought for a short time. He kept pushing me to meet him, but it wasn't a good condition for me. Anyway, I'm also going to find out what he's thinking. In contact with the hostess, there was a need. "All right," I nodded my head when I finished my judgment quickly. Then out of nowhere I reached out my one hand. "Please take good care of my money, Mr. White Rabbit." I looked at him with a smile. The contract was signed, so let's shake hands, but Vinter did not readily join hands. Vinter, that looked down at my hand, turned a little too thick. "What? It's a bit awkward to shake hands with a man." I remembered myself disguised as magic. As soon as I was about to withdraw my hand, Vinter held my hand rather hastily. In a moment my hands were tightly trapped in the warmth that was much larger and hotter than mine. I look forward to working with you, lady." Holding my hands together, he murmured. It was a more subdued voice. It was then, "Would you like to check the favorability system?" Vinter, 2 million gold, fame 200. My eyes brightened and I had a chance to check his favorability. I chose 2 million gold without hesitation. By deducting system 2 million gold, I checked the favorability of Vinter. Reserved funds 68 million gold, and my funds were still only the prize money of the hunting competition as the jewelry business had not yet begun in earnest. But I couldn't care less about it. Favorite 52%. There's been a sharp rise in the favorability of Vinter. Lastly, was at 44%. Now that it's over half, it's a new feeling, and at the same time there's a lot of vanity. Less than a month is left before the appearance of a normal mode hostess. The favor in hard states except for Eclise, perhaps the province, has just lost 1 or 2 people to half. Compared to the normal mode, which rose 10 to 15% in one episode, it was the level of difficulty that made me shudder. If I were really playing on my cell phone, I'd be so upset that I'd end the game and delete it. I managed to hold back the power of flinching into my hand. This was a reality for me, so I couldn't shut down or stop the game. No, you've come this far without dying. By the time I was comforted, the white writing on the speck of the empty space changed again to favorability. I realized until then that he was holding my hand tight. I'd like you to stop now. He let go of his hand, glancing downwards with a vague face. The contract should be made by my side and sent in secret by letter. I'll do it, thank you. I'd better get going. I'm ready to go back after a rough answer. Vinter got up and saw me off. When I reached the entrance to the exit, he suddenly asked what I had forgotten. By the way, did you bring your carriage with you today? A carriage to ride back? I asked back with a silly face. Vinter nodded. Yes, I saw you had come alone. There was a silence. Fucking teleport. It's been so long since I've been here that I forgot again. I'll add another request. After all, I had no choice but to pretend nothing was wrong with my blushing face, and to pretend that I was going to take me to Hamilton Street this time. A low laugh rang out clearly. I had to fan my face with my hand. The contract and letter mentioned by Vinter arrived the following day. The sun was good. After a long time I came out with a book. I was just about to read a few pages sitting under a tree that I was always sitting and reading. From somewhere the white butterflies sat on the floor, hovering around 1 or 2. Originally there were many butterflies flying around the garden, so I didn't notice it at first. Aware of something strange, it was when a group of butterflies gathered in one place. They spread their wings at a speed as if asking to look at them, and my eyes naturally turned to the humidity of repeatedly folding. When I looked in the book, I was embarrassed to see butterflies arranged squarely in rectangular shapes. They who had been flapping their wings until my eyes reached finally achieved their desired purpose, began to shine. What's wrong with butterflies? I stared at the process with my eyes wide open. And after a while the square butterflies disappeared and a white envelope appeared on the spot. It was an incredible sight for my own eyes. Looking blankly at the envelope, I soon found something engraved on it. Was a white rabbit pattern. Vinter, I will write the contract on my side and send it secretly through a letter. I remembered what he said yesterday. I told him to contact me through the letter. Unexpected, you use this method rather than the bunny with a manly voice. This was much better. I immediately picked up the envelope on the floor and got up from my seat. After returning to the room in a hurry, I sat in front of my desk and ripped off the envelope with a paper knife. Inside were a diamond gemstone processing and distribution contract, an asset management agency contract, and a brief memo, and I'll pick you up at Hamilton Street tomorrow at 10 p.m. to fulfill the contract. Will you take the contract with you? Then implementing the contract. As I tilted my head, I soon realized what it was by reading the genealogy. It was a meeting condition. He offered to identify me. As soon as you sign the contract, you've got to carry it out. I looked at the memo with a cold eye for a moment, and soon muttered a sigh. Okay, let's think of it as a day with man. It's a love simulation game, but I was in a hurry to survive without a date. Now there must be some romantic episode. One tried hard to put down the creeping anxiety. Early morning the following day, I called Emily into the room and asked her to dress up. Are you going out, miss? I'll call more talented servants. I'm going out secretly. Secretly, her eyes were as big as a glass of paint. There was no particular reason why I decided to sneak out. Wouldn't it be annoying to tell the butler that it will definitely go into the ears of the Duke or Derek, and that he is going to meet a stranger? I mean, until I get back, don't let anyone get in my room. However, she looked uneasy at my words. Just give an excuse. I'm not feeling well today. Well, you'll be back in a minute, will you? I'll be back by the end of the day. Well, I said casually with her curly touch of makeup. After roughly putting on makeup and getting my hair done, I changed into a sky blue dress of knee length. Perhaps because of the complementary color effect, it matched well with the dark red hair. The embroidery of the dress, which was pointed in dark blue in between, was delicate. I chose it considering the color of my eyes. You have to prepare this for a date with man. I'm looking in the mirror and I'm satisfied with my smile and gave a nod. How is it pretty? I turned and asked Emily, and she covered her mouth with both hands and poured out like an exclamation. You are so beautiful, you're like a goddess just sticking out of a mural carved in the temple. I had my eyes on Emily's goosebumps, but I felt good inside. Now get out there and get a man in the hall. Look out for Danina. Now that all the decorations are done, it was time for a full-fledged escape. Fortunately, early morning's workmen were busy doing their jobs and few people were walking around. I easily got out of the back door of the mansion and got on the way to the smoke field. I was thinking of using the hole. I was afraid I'd run into some of the train knights nearby, so I couldn't help but dragged out Emily. It was to look like a walk when caught. Fortunately, all of them were in training, and there was no one near the hole. Emily was shocked to see me familiarly pushing the bushes aside. My God, miss, when did you find this place? Put it back when I left. Okay. I don't think you should go out like this. I rolled up my dress and put my bare knee on the floor without answering. I spent a lot of time dressing up and walking, so I was in a hurry because it was already close to 10 o'clock. While I was crawling on the floor, lying on my stomach and crawling out of the dog hole, Emily continued to sigh. My God, soon out. I snapped my knee off the dirt and waved my hand in the hole. I'll be back. You're really not going to tell me when you'll be back? I'll be back before dark. Well, he won't hold me up late at night to satisfy his curiosity. Leaving the worried maid behind, I hurried away. Soon after I came out to the main street. I went straight to the corner of the deserted alley where Vinter was taking me. It was a little late too, and I could see a big tall figure already in the alley. I waited a long time. I was going to pretend to know, but suddenly I stopped because it wasn't just Vinter in the alley. On the other hand, Bon the lion stood behind him and looked at me. Why are you bring him? I feel weird for a moment with a child's eyes like they're looking at me. I lost. Doesn't it seem like you're dating a man with a child? As I looked alternately at the two, my eyes met with Vinter. I could see the navy blue eyes growing faintly. Why didn't you come in disguise today? He asked with a look of embarrassment. I asked back in embarrassment. Should I have come in disguise? You did it last time, so I thought you'd do it again. Weren't you asking me out? There was a quiet silence in the alley. It was Hidugger Lim of a young child who broke it. Hick, it's not a date, it's a date, shouted the lion's mask as if teasing. I am still dumbfounded. Where were we going? We're going to hand out the bread, said the lion child happily. It was the moment a white square window flashed before my eyes. System main quest: the whereabouts of the lost children. First slum with the wizard. Would you like to proceed with the quest? Compensation plus 5% favorability of Vinter fame 50. Accept, refuse, volunteer. I doubted my ears. With my eyes wide open, I am repeating the writing of the system window one more time, and Vinter had an awkward expression as to whether he had misrepresented me. I'm sorry, I couldn't tell you in advance. Of course I know you'll wear pants. There was no room for embarrassment for mistaking it as a date alone. At the same time, the letters in the system window changed. System main quest and will be automatically accepted in 5 seconds. System 5 system for this crazy game. I pressed accept with trembling hands. Then a new square window appeared. System. Would you like to move to Trot and the place of quest with the help of a magician? Yes, no. When I chose yes, Vinter extended his hand to me. We're going to Trot and it won't be inconvenient for you to move with the horse. It was the way I had experienced once before, but I didn't really want to hold his hand. I didn't even know where Trotan was. It's been a long time since I was possessed by this game, but it was the first name I've heard of. The tide is not good. Lady hesitating, I was puzzled by the blank. Perhaps because I have been twisted since I saw the word volunteer activity, I felt like a tacit pressure to fulfill the contract. Yeah, you're not going to go to the mountain to do volunteer work. There are so many slums around the capital. I cried and beat him in the hand, pressing down on the creepy creek. I hold him in the midst of a little wish. The lion came up and grabbed my empty hand by ratio Trot, and with the spell of grotesque pronunciations, the white light in front of my eyes flashed, shoot me, slapped me. When we opened our eyes again, we stood on the seagulls, flying by the seagulls. Where the hell is this place? I looked around with blurry eyes. A little while ago it was in the neat corner of the capital, but now lighthouses and sailing ships were seen around. It was a maddening experience. It's a trait and it's a port city, Vinter replied kindly to myself, saying words, a port city not near the capital. It's the front line of the Eastern Empire. I couldn't quite understand, so I asked again. Why do we have to come so far? Because the damage caused by the war here is the most severe. I'm focusing on it. So why are you doing it with me when you're with me, you bastard? I've got words that fill my throat, toughly swallowed. I see. First of all, this was not the fault of Vinter. The system ordered it. I followed him with so much solace. We climbed the bank and walked toward a village far away. The village, which was getting closer and closer, looked devastated at a glance. Half-cracked buildings and roads, no one wandering around in the midst of a busy time of fishing. The village was like an abandoned place. It was a little scary to see that it was so different from the fancy capital behind the end of the war. Was hard. A scary and horrible life. Well, no matter how powerful a country is, it can't be fine. But what I'm scared about is the fact that this whole thing is too realistic. Normal mode is the dream of a poor woman. I was only shown the capital city life full of hope. These details were not described. Why did the background of the episode in hard mode so gloomy? It was when I was looking around, swallowing a deep sigh. You're the noble lady who came back then, right? The lion who stood by me quietly and walked suddenly whispered. I opened my eyes in amazement, then watched the boy walking ahead and killed my voice. How did you know? Speech and voice. I remembered. You are quite sharp, are you? The child laughed at my compliment, gleaming a smile I couldn't make at that time. I said with a wide mouth, "Thank you for back then. I'm still alive thanks to you, really. If the lion's mask didn't come out and back me up before the cane shot by Winter, I would have died of a slump in favor. When I say thank you," the lion eyes were bent to the fullest and his eyes were sullen. "I got in big trouble with my teacher after Auntie left." "Auntie, do you see me as an old lady?" I was angry at the prettily decorated title. "Then what do I call you?" "Call me Penelope, it's my name. I'm Rayon. I named it after a lion. I like lions the most among animals." "Yes, Rayon." I nodded and satisfied. Back to the original topic. "Why were you scolded? Is it because you take me in?" "Yes, but they complimented me on my discovery. Thanks to Mrs. Penelope. Good for you." Perhaps because he was still young, the conversation rambled. Still, I smiled calmly, listening to the child. "And since then my teacher were very upset." "Why?" "He lost faith by pointing his cane at the person who helped me." I looked at the back of the empty space where I had been walking first with fresh eyes. I could see a purple favorability gauge bar floating above his head. "Is it guilt then?" Rayon whispered again as he tilted his head. "On the day Miss Penelope came back, and then he was happy. Really, as soon as Penelope got there he planned where to start volunteering." I frowned at the words. Added, "After all, I had no intention of dating him. Come to think of it, you almost did volunteer work when you were in normal mode, except for meeting at the ball." The service was in contact with the hostess. It was when I was staring at his back of the head with distraught eyes. Before we knew it, we were walking up the hill and reaching the village. At the entrance of the village, the shabby-looking Linolds raised their eyes wide at the sight of his wife, who appeared while playing. A noble lady in a dress and two masked men. "That's worth seeing." I smiled a self-contradictory smile at our reflection. Vinter moved into a quiet place where there were no people. When he reached the vacant lot on one side of the village, he stopped walking and he took a black pocket out of his arms. "Rayon, check if there are people around us." "The lion's mask," said Turitakan, calling out the strange spell. It was like magic to check a man's presence. "None." When Rayon replied as if it had been confirmed, Vinter immediately took action. He untied the knot in his pocket, and took something small out of it, and threw it into the bar. There's something fell on the floor, suddenly turned into a huge table. What I stared at it with my eyes wide open. He then took out something short from his pocket, one after another. After a while, a huge awning screened several simple chairs and tables, and a large tin can containing soup, a basket of bread, and a bowl of salad were listed on the table in turn. In an instant, a temporary restaurant-like wetland was formed in the vacant lot. "It's a magic shrinkage." Vinter looked back at me in astonishment, and replied awkwardly, "At that time, the sea breeze with a fishy scent blew once dangling, a clear bell rang out. As I turned my head along the sound, the bell hung at the end of the tent was swaying in the wind. "Now people are coming." Rayon approached me and told me nicely indeed. Some time later, the people who heard the bell crept in. It was all a ragged streak. "I'll give them the soup. And will you give some bread?" Vinter encouraged me. It wasn't difficult, so I went to the back of the bread basket, nodding my head. Soon the food distribution began. "Thank you, thank you." The people bowed their heads to the Vinter as they took the food. As time passed, more and more people gathered. Then I suddenly thought it was strange. Most of the people who came for free food were young children. It wasn't adults, but the number of children was overwhelming. I took advantage of the diminishing number of people for a moment, and asked the Vinter aloud, "Why are the majority of the children coming for food?" He looked back at me with a little surprise but soon gave me an answer: there were orphans by bombing. I lost my parents overnight. Nice families don't come for free meals as a disgrace to the British Empire. I understood why Vince was so far away from the front line. He was particularly weak with young children. It reminds me of a long time ago when I was complaining about why I came so far. My heart grew a little solemn. Yes, I answered quietly, and then I devoted myself to giving out the bread silently. Fortunately, there was plenty of food. When it was almost ran out, the Vinter quietly went behind the tent and took out new food. It was when the busy surroundings became somewhat quiet that something a little absurd happened. A black-haired child who did not go even after eating his share of the food stood in line again. Was he hungry? But the child disappeared without eating, and soon after he came again and lined up again. The mass mortuary must have been scary, ignoring Rayon and taking the bread straight from me. It wasn't just him. On and over again I saw some kids picking up bread pretending it was their first time. When I gave out the bread without saying anything, the line became bolder. If you give it to them like that, I'm afraid it's never end. Fifth, when I was about to give bread to the black-hair, Vinter blocked me. He didn't even say anything to me, but the child got scared and ran away quickly. Looking at the child's distant back, I soon turned my head toward the Vinter. "Didn't you prepare enough?" "Of course I prepared enough food to spare, but it's not always enough, lady." He explained it softly, as if he taught me. "Children who are fed several times are probably hiding it at home and coming back for it. Or you're paying the orphans." "I know that much," I retorted coyly. "You know, but you didn't care." It turned the dark blue eyes to embarrassment. I felt that I gave me bread even though I knew he was being playful. "Will you feel like an immature young lady for the first time in volunteer work?" I opened my mouth, upsetting the mind of Vinter looking at me. "How about you then?" "I would have starved to death today watching if there was no piece of bread on the street until you came here." Thinking of a distant past, he laughed bitterly. "Can't you just let a few of them pile up anyway? They going to save it for a few days and starve?" I could see the blue pupils slowly bulging large. Like a man who never expected me to say this, "Run sound someone I know." After a moment's sweet lip he replied, "You told me to grab those kids and eat as much as they want." "You've met the mistress." I met him to find out, but I was shocked again. He has already done volunteer work with Yoju. So what am I going to do now? I expected it. It's a game story. When I was really sure that Vinter might meet Yvonne and bring her back soon, I was suddenly scared. I'm telling you, it's a life-threatening situation. Unlike me, who felt it, he stared at me with unknowable emotions and spoke calmly. "If you don't want to take it away from the stronger children, eat as much as you can." That was true. But it was poverty with minimal food in the house. Just because you eat a lot today doesn't mean you're not hungry tomorrow. Waking up from the thought, I shrugged and answered insignificantly, "And if you overeat while starving for a few days, you'll get sick. Haven't you experienced it?" When I saw the pupil of the empty space exposed through the gap, I could see a vivid emotion and disappeared. "You say it as if you've experienced it. Well, what do you think?" I squeezed out a smile that wouldn't come out, and now I've predicted what Vinter might think. Is the woman who became the only princess of the empire one morning from the common people not happy about her calling for poverty? Or is she praying for a real princess who gives rum to the angel even in a poor environment? Let's go around and find out who I am today. It's not fun if I tell you everything. It didn't matter now why he dragged me to volunteer work. The game is already on track in my mind. Vinter Verdandi was painted with a red X over the wall. We moved when the meal was almost over because there is still one more place to share. "Are you all right?" Perhaps because of my sassy attire, Vinter continued to look sorry. "It's all right." I could only say that I was okay because I had my own mistake. Besides, I was really sick because I was just giving out this bread without thinking about anything about it. We traversed the winding alleyway and moved to the end of the village. The more you get to the outskirts, the more buildings, the more roads, fewer and fewer people went. And at the end of the village finally reached a wide plain on a cliff facing the sea. A shabby shanty house rather than a building was built in a huddle. As I passed by, I was shocked by the worse conditions than the war-torn village. Where the hell are we? The townspeople's forced to use mana. It's where the people who own it live. Those with mana? So are you saying the magistrate? No, they are literally easygoing people who lack qualifications and learning to be called wizards. After the bombing, I brought in a crystal ball to check the mana and did a major test. That made me feel more like I was falling into a mystery. It was already known that the Empire would unknowingly reject wizards. But isn't it too much to put more rich people in a difficult situation altogether? Why do you go so far? You're the same Inca Empire, I asked with a frown. There's a war, but it's not easy to restore Trotan because of the periodic attacks of Layla. Layla, new country? Yes, their aim is to get rid of all the wizards from the world, so the Trotan people think these people are the cause of the problem. I think it's a long-standing conflict, and I can feel a certain emotion in the voice of Winter. I was still not convinced. Why aren't they sending soldiers? Don't you have a long lord? The remnants of the new kingdom who lost their place in the war hide in the Archina Islands, and then use magic to attack. Well, it's hard to approach the area because the waves are so strong and the canyons are so many. It's a dilemma. He finished talking and pulled something out of his arms, then he came a step closer to me and bowed down. What? When the rabbit went without a moment to back down, it came close to me, and my neck felt heavy. It's an ancient relic, he answered, and at the same time my eyes lit up. System Hidden Quest and Relics of Ancient Magistrate complete. You have confirmed the trust of System Wizard. As a reward, Vinter's favorability plus 3% was obtained. The purple gauge bar above Vinter had blinked as if the favorable sentiment was rising. I doubted my eyes when I saw a system window that suddenly opened. When there's a toxic substance nearby, the color changes. In particular, the more you shiver, the more dangerous it is, so avoid your seat immediately. Vinter explained what he gave me. I asked in a dazed voice. Why do you give it to me? Why not to the real hostess? The fear of preparing for a situation that may not be known. He answered my question right away. It wasn't the direction I wanted. Unlike the place where we were serving, this place is a little dangerous for outsiders. There might be remnants of the new Layla kingdom. If you are thirsty, do not drink a sip of news water. Winter uses a solemn tone of caution. Thank you, I'll be careful. I still nodded my head with a puzzled look. The rabbit mask still closed his eyes, which appeared to be the crevice folded beautifully. This place has a small population, so I'm afraid I can give it out quickly and go back to the capital. With a welcome remark, for the first time in a while he stretched out his waist, which he had bent. Soon he repeated what he did in the previous village. He took out his pocket and took out all the shrinkage from it. The difference was that it was easy to write magic in front of those who possessed mana. I could quickly realize that he was doing it on purpose to give hope to frustrated people. After a long time, people came up with a bucket of slow dancing chore. Since then it has been a repeat of the same distribution as before, perhaps because of the small number. The rum line for the shelter of the empty space was quickly finished. It looks like it's over, so please sit down and take a break, lady. Suddenly Vinter brought me a chair and recommended it to me. When I looked at him with curious eyes, he said his business. I'd like to see the chief here for a moment, cousin. He's a wizard. It was amazing that there was a wizard who was the leader of the shantytown. I told him to do so without showing off. Make yourself at home. Thank you. Vinter gave me a short bow and hurried down the slope. It's great because I've been suffering from stiffness in my legs. Oh, my leg! I sank down with a sound of my will and stomach. Just in time, a cool sea breeze blew away the heat generated by labor. I sat down and pulled the chair a little more to the edge of the wall. It was ridiculous for me to do things out of the blue, not on a date. However, seeing the sea through the open sea, I was only offended. Well, sometimes it's not bad to be nice. The endless blue sea, red sunset. It was a picturesque scene that didn't go well with the shantytown right behind it. Looked blurry over the distant horizon. If that's the Archina Islands, it was closer than I thought. If it was right, it was when I thought I'd ask when the blanks came. With the laughter of the children who say Penelope, someone in the back yelled at me. Turned around. Rayon waved at me, surrounded by the children. The cane held in his other hand spewed out late drops. Is it because you're with you friends in the same situation? Rayon, who didn't thoroughly use magic earlier, seemed very comfortable with him holding a bread. Rayon shouted at me with a bright face, can I go to the beach under the cliff with my friends for a moment? No, I cut it like a knife. He asked back with sign of disappointment. Why ask your teacher? I'm getting permission from Penelope because my teacher wasn't here. It sounded right. I was worried if I should allow it, but soon I shook my head firmly. I'm going to go to the capital soon if Vinter comes anyway. Anyway, it's dangerous play around here only. Okay, it was the moment I turned my head again, leaving Rayon, who was making an excited sound behind the sun, suddenly brightened up against the backdrop of a red sunset. System main quest: the whereabouts of the lost children first serving the slum with the wizard. The quest is complete. As a reward for system, you got plus 5% of Vinter and 50 of fame, total 460. Is it over now? It was a very fruitful day. I'm going to look at the system window and I'm going to force a smile. It was when I was resting. Suddenly there was a sense of strange calm around me. I turned my head to the back of the stroke in a sense of incompatibility. Rain, apparently the place where the children had been crowded before, was empty with a clear laugh. I slowly got up and looked around, but there was no Rayon anywhere. Rayon, don't fool around. I came down the cliff and called my teeth, but not only Rayon but also the children that surrounded the area was not seen. Rayon, the shantytown where the dusk fell, felt quaintly still. It was originally a small number of people, but suddenly everyone gone. Scariness flowed through the spine. Just a few seconds into the system window. The footstep sounds going down the cliff became faster and faster. Rain, don't play games and get out of here. I ran frantically between the shanty towns and called Rayon. I'm sure I'll play hide and seek with the kids. I tried hard to think positively, checking the back of dozens of huts, but there was no Rayon anywhere. No matter where, I had no choice but to go through the details of other people's household. Rayon. The shanty shack, made of wooden boards and fabric, was mostly empty. Even if someone is there, Rayon is not. Hey, what are you doing? Sorry, I'm sorry. Did you happen to see the kid with the lion mask that I was sharing earlier? I don't know. Get out right now. The shantytowners coldly kicked me out even though they heard my voice, who was obviously anxiously searching for a kid. The vigilance and fear of outsiders seemed strong. I scoured the shanty houses, but I couldn't find Rayon. In the end, Vinter, who was going to meet the chief, did return yet. I looked at the shantytown, which was shaking endlessly at the entrance of the cliff on the slope. Where the hell did he go? The sunset was about to fall. Maybe they were taken away by someone who did it. Perhaps it is because I have been warned by the vacant lot that it is a place where outsiders are in danger. All sorts of bad forebears are beginning to come into my head. What if my favorability fall again? At this moment, when Rayon disappeared, it was the fear of a liberal rock that preceded my worry about my child. I knew well that I was selfish and mean, but I still had nightmares when I first met the white rabbit, the masked Vintet. A cane that shoots light at me and a bad feeling that falls off without a hand. He felt terrible about the children who had been saved enough to be angry just to enter the secret space. But if he know me who didn't see the kid properly, that make worse matters hit the worst. If it's sweet, what's the point of liking someone who barely passed half? When I thought so far, my eyes quickly became feverish and breathing became rough. Think, what should I do? I tried to think coolly, pressing down on the surging emotions. As a desperate enemy to break this situation, I had to think rationally. It was the moment. Penelope, can I follow my friends to the beach below the cliff for a moment? And Rayon's clear voice passed through my ears. I was so embarrassed that I completely forgot the conversation I just had with Rayon. He can use magic, so he can ignore the possibility of a momentary shift. I turned straight and ran down the slope fast under the cliff. It was difficult to climb down the huge rocks that were piled up naturally, not artificially created. It's even more monotonous. I eventually lifted my dress and jumped from the rock with my shoes off. Fine sand particles touching the soles of the feet. At one point the sun was completely down. Rayon. I searched for Leon again everywhere. However, the sandy beach was so wide and dark that it was not easy to see the small body of a young child right away. Nevertheless, I ran barefoot on the vast beach. How long have you been running, walking, and looking around? Finally moving far away, I could see the men. Rayon. I ran wildly toward the child's name at the top of my voice. But something was a bit strange. Perhaps they recognized me, but soon they began to move toward the sea in a hurry. I clenched my teeth and ran. It was when the distance was so narrow that the shapes of the shadows could be seen. I lost. Because of that, the people who were not able to see well because it was dark were clearly revealed. 6 people in black robes stood in a circle, and in the midst of it I could see the trapped children leaning against each other's backs. Whatever they did, they all seemed to have lost their minds. A group of Layla's new kingdom. I opened my eyes. The reality hit. Concerned, stop. I clenched my teeth and ran. Unless you're an idiot, you wouldn't have known they were trying to use magic to move. The blue light gradually rose around them, and at their feet an unknown pattern was quickly carved. I was running like hell, but I wonder if I can get there before they teleport. Even if I did, I didn't know if I could stop them by myself. What should I do? It was the moment. All the blue beams that burst out of them came to my mind. A square window brightened. System: a sudden quest has been made. You'll stop the evil forces trying to kidnap children by chanting magic spells. Compensation plus 3% of Winter's favor and plus 50 fame. Except I couldn't feel anything wrong with the development. I beat accept madly, and immediately the writing in the square window changed. System: use your magic against the evil forces. Magic order: Thunder Pyram, Thunder Pyram. I shouted the last spell quickly. It was the moment there was a flash in the sky. And with a tremendous roar, the light of several streams is right over their heads. It's down. The round robe went out in all directions to the Thunder Pyram. The rapidly spreading blue light went out, and they groaned and crawled on the floor. Why is it so powerful? I stared blankly at the scene, stopping running for a moment. At this rate, I thought I could deal with 6 people. Then one of the guys who was lying on the floor wriggled and pointed at me. That girl, get rid of her first. Thunder Pyram. A flash of light struck over him again. Without even screaming, he hit his face on the sandy beach of the city. Above it came a pungent smoke. I shuddered at the terrible sight. It must hurt so bad. But I couldn't leave the men still in their minds after the attack. Thunder Pyram, Thunder Pyram, Thunder Pyram. Huang Guang Quang Chui Chen. Thunder hit the 3 wriggling bastards. In an instant they were like the first one and knock out with this smoke as they knock out everywhere. I hurried to the children's side. Of course the lion mask was among the unconscious children. Rayon. I hugged his little body. I shook it gently, but Rayon didn't budge. When I was thinking for a moment whether I should take off his mask and check the child's condition, or if I should leave with him, or not, the body in my arms flinched. Rayon then opened his eyes with a faint groan. Rayon, do you come to your senses? Penelope. Oh no. I'm really sorry to the other kids, but I'll take Rayon and leave first. So I met a beggar who didn't know where he went, and told him I don't know if he was going to bring the rest of them or not. And I jumped up from my seat, and as soon as I was about to take a step, a little hand grabbed the hem of my dress. Back. There was a sudden eerie sensation in the back. Dead. I felt it was too late when I turned my back on him. Before I knew it, there was a black robe coming close behind me. There was a forever. That something with a sharp glow came over me. I opened my mouth. I knew it was too late to avoid even if I shouted the spell, but it was to protect Rayon Paratio. A small whisper was delivered from my arms 1 step ahead of me. My eyes flashed white. When I opened my eyes again, there was a completely different place in front of me. Not the beach where there was a fierce battle. I was sitting on the wall of a temple with a shantytown like a lie, on a chair that was looking at the scenery. The child, who had been holding him in his arms until just now, and the blade of the knife that was getting closer to me disappeared. This is I am looking around with a face of great confusion. It suddenly occurred to me that Rayon whispered a small spell just before he was hit by the kidnapper's blade. It was like the spell I shouted in the alley when I came to trot, and it's a mobile spell. I opened my eyes at the crucial moment. Rayon memorized the spell and moved me to a safe place. I jumped out of my seat and ran to the edge of the cliff. It was to see the beach. But I couldn't see well because it was far away and visibility was dark. But at that moment I could see a blue burst out of the distance. The kidnappers were clear. Rayon. I felt terrible that all I could do right away was the only spell provided by the system. However, I had no choice but to open my mouth in a hurryingly. Thunder Pyram, it's dangerous, lady. It was then someone's arm blocked me from standing near the edge of the cliff. I turned my head sharply. The purple gauge bar was the first to be seen. After that, the familiar rabbit mask finally. Where the hell have you been and just got here? When I saw him, the hot things went up in a flash, but I bit my teeth hard and pressed it down. That's not what matters right now. Rayon's been kidnapped. I breathed heavily and told the present thread. When I found out that Rayon had disappeared a little while ago, I was afraid that his favorability would plummet. But when something that I was worried about came up, there was no time to worry about such a thing. I said hurriedly, pointing my finger at the far side of the cliff where the blue had burst. You have to stop it quickly, Rayon. The kidnappers here. They're calm down, lady. But Vinter was bizarrely calm. I thought he'd be resentful with the flash of a favorable gauge bar right now. But he was worried about me. Is there any injury? I'm fine, so come on, Rayon, you'll be fine. What, it's very late, I'll get you back. I couldn't quite understand what he was saying. It was then white light came out behind Vinter. System children has been kidnapped, distracting evil forces. I couldn't believe what was going on, so I stared blankly into the air. That's how the blanks hasten me. That's enough, he's been kidnapped. Where are you going? I'd been training dozens of times for this. He cut me off with a single stroke. We've got a bunch of safeguards in place, so something dangerous enough to worry about won't happen. He mean I'll take care of it on my own even if you don't worry. Ironically, the words of the one who draws the line came to me a cold head. It's gone. I stared at him with a cold look and said, was this your intention from the start? You want to use a child as bait and test how I look? No, it's not like that, lady, so how am I supposed to take this? Should I just dismiss all this as a coincidence and go back and pretend there was no contract? Is that what you want? There was no answer to my aggressive question. After quite a long silence, he sighed before long and asked me, I'd like to ask lady about this situation. How did you use alternative magic? It was me who was speechless this time. The lightning magic is an offensive magic that is difficult to handle and so destructive that even wizards don't use it well. But you now attack the enemy perfectly without making any mistakes. He then pointed his finger at me. Following him, I lowered my head. Under the collarbone, the magic necklace that Vint had hung earlier was in place. The necklace is not only toxic but also mana. There is a change in the nature of the force, he said, revealing another function hidden in his necklace. A color-changing bead embedded in the middle of a colorful star-shaped ornament. The beads in my eyes were still as white as the first. Look, right after magic there's no color change. It's proof that you don't have any mana. But I just felt a lot of magic from you on the eve of the hunt. Isn't that strange? I felt like someone was hitting the back of my head with a hammer. I never imagined that some people thought the movement by the system was strange. Besides, what are mana and magic? I raised my head again. I couldn't tell what Vince was looking at now because he was covered in a mask. What's for sure, volunteer work was an excuse. Indeed, this episode is just that. Dating wasn't the whole story. I was trying to test if you had anything to do with Layla. I had to check. Vinter added urgently. Magic children are being kidnapped by them every month. A little bit of can't easily get past the centripetal. He who was fidgeting like an excuse suddenly stopped talking when he saw my face. I'm sorry if I offended you, lady. Without further excuses, he bowed his head to me and apologized. I was just dumbfounded. Be brazen to the end now. I couldn't get angry with him. For him who has noticed something beyond me, because it was a reasonable doubt. You spoke of trust so much to me that you did not trust me at all. A dejected smile came out. Slowly raising his head, his eyes went blank. At a moment his pupils were shaking shallowly. So what, have I been cleared of my charges now? I still don't know how you use magic. I don't know. I answered in a dry voice. It was just a spell in my head and I just spit it out. I don't care if you don't believe it, I do. Vinter answered me with a moderate mixture of lies. At least I knew you wasn't the one to hurt the kids. There was no sarcasm of good luck. Looking at me, who was silent, Vince stopped the situation. I've got to get you out of here. Any further delay could cut off Roan's signal. It was the moment. System main quest: the whereabouts of the lost children. Second with the Wizard of Rayon. Will you proceed with the quest? Compensation plus 5% favorability of Vinter 50 fame decline penalty minus 10% favorability of Vinter accept refuse. Again the crazy system window opened. I opened my eyes to the first penalty I saw. Please, you crazy game. Apart from the unfortunate circumstances of the children's abduction, I didn't want to be with Vinter anymore. But minus 10% were too big. Should I just say no? System main quest will be automatically accepted in 5 seconds. System 5, System 4, but the fucking system didn't even give me a chance to worry. I said with tears in my eyes, after all, I'm coming with you. He looked back at me with a whimsical look, as he heard that, like I was not going to hear. What are you saying now? Looking for the kids? Let's go together. This is my calling as a wizard. That would be my calling then, now that I'm using magic, lady, he called me in a cool voice in my reply. But the main quest had already begun, and I had nowhere to retreat. If I go home in this mood, I'll be able to sleep with my feet out. If you didn't want to take responsibility for me, go. You shouldn't have dragged me in first, as I retorted coldly. He lost his words. In any case, it is unfair for my current position, which has been cleared of the false charge. We're going to their base. We don't know how many people are gathered or how dangerous. Vinter kept trying to stop him from taking me with him. It's all right, I said emphatically. It wasn't okay at all actually. In case of emergency, magic spells will pop up again. In case of emergency, the system window will be activated again, and 2 are better than 1. You don't have time? He eventually reached out his hand reluctantly when I pressed him. When I held the hand, a square window came up again before my eyes. System go to solo for the main quest. When we closed our eyes to the piercing white light and opened again, we stood by the side of the surf sun. Where is this place? I looked around at a strange place and said, it was certainly not Trotan. It's a small island called Soleil near the Archina Islands. It's quite far from Trotan, and they use it as an intermediate stop when they can't move at once. So are we going back to the Archina Islands? No rayon signal is coming from there, it's stuck. Vinter turned from the sea and pointed to one place with its hands. Turning his head along with him, I immediately frowned. Under a large cliff not far from the beach, a dreary cave that seemed to say you'll have a hard time if you go in. I really didn't want to go in, but I had to move ahead, get in there fast. Wait a minute, Vinter stopped me like that. For a moment I looked back at him with a curious look. Put these on. He suddenly took off his shoes in front of me. Things are going too fast. I forgot that I was barefoot. I stared at the big shoes of Vinter and soon turned them down. It's okay. It's already as dirty as it gets. There may be sharp stones on the bottom of the cave. It's too big for me anyway, so if I walk it'll come off. And when I put these on, what about you? It's adjusted to fit the size of the wearer's foot. It has magic on it. It's okay because I put a tonic on my foot, he said in a tough tone to me, who was going to refuse again. If you want to enter the cave with me, wear it. It sounded like you would not let me in unless I wore it today. I felt like I was looking at many aspects of him. Okay, I reluctantly put on the shoes. He gave me the shoes, which had been said to be big enough to fall loose, gradually shrank to fit the size of the inner foot. Rabbit's mask robe, barefoot, blunt enough to point out that he was a man. Winter said, let's go. We went straight to the cave. Indeed, the cave looked sinister and suspicious from the outside, and the cave had stairs to go underground, not ordinary caves. Then Vinter took his cane out of his arms. A small mass of light rose from the end with a chirp, be careful as it may be slippery. He stepped up the stairs first, then I followed carefully along the stairs. Stomped down. I don't know if it led to the bottom of the sea, but cold and salty drops of water fell from the ceiling of the cave. Frowning at the water, I asked, looking up at Vinter, silently revealing the way. We don't have time, so please explain the operation briefly. Vinter glanced back at me. His eyes were stained with embarrassment for a moment. No other operation has been set up, I asked back in bewilderment. What? The kidnapping of Rayon to pursue the base of the remnants of the new country is something we've planned for a long time. But I didn't expect them to show up today and kidnap all the other children. You're testing me, that's why you came all the way here. A new realization came again, and then I narrowed my forehead to a sudden thought. In the meantime, you're thinking of taking me to the capital. I know it sounds like an excuse. Blanket hesitated and opened his mouth. I also had no circumstance. Lady, what do you mean? They came out of nowhere, and I've already used magic to save the children. I have confirmed that you have nothing to do with the purpose, but I regret bringing you to here. I opened my eyes wide and looked up at Vinter. He was like he was expecting everything. He looked as calm as he did at that moment. The only thing I could think of was getting you back to where you were. But he didn't seem at all calm. Confessing behind it, he turned his head and made eye contact with me. You don't understand me like this. I won't ask for your understanding. Lady, I can't understand myself either. His always clear eyes were bloodshot. Obsessively suspicious of everything, wary of all sides, he seemed a little tired, crazy. I breathed a deep sigh at his words. It made me so angry that I was suspected of being the remnant of the Layla Hingdam. But there must be every bit of panic and concern for the children at the sudden raid. Why are the remnants of Layla kidnapping them? I put aside my personal feelings and decided to focus on the immediate problems. Vinter replied to the change topic after a brief silence. They're using children's mana to use magic. You said that they have no magic, but how are they using magic now? The remnants are just followers of Layla, and no one has the power of Layla. They steal mana to get rid of the wizards. They steal mana? That's how you transform and manipulate mana. On the eve of the hunt, I frowned. What the hell is their ultimate goal? Getting rid of all the wizards from this world? And without wizards, they're trying to resurrect Layla in the world resurrection. How the hell do you resurrect an imaginary god? As an atheist, I felt their argument was nothing but groundless, but Vinter let out heavy sigh. Layla is not a god. Then what an ancient minority of people with magical powers ancient. If wizards use magic as a medium of mana and nature, they use up their lives and have similar powers. But they burn out their own lives. People hated it, so they started using my power to extort other people's lives. It was ancient Balta that they built to accumulate this power and seize the world. I heard that Balta was founded by wizards, I muttered with a confused face. The Crown Prince also knew that the oppression of wizards began from the footstroke, but what Vinter said was completely different. When he saw me unable to get a feel, he added heavily. The moment the Layla were sealed by ancient wizards, history was transformed by their curse. Curses, all the sorceresses who stopped them from taking over the world and sealed them in Valta were forgotten. Because of the curse, the descendants of those wizards were ostracized by people and said, I was shocked by the new information. If this is true, isn't it true that the magistrates, including the Vinter, are really fighting an uphill battle? Is there always such sophisticated settings in hard mode? I could feel the chills of unknown reasons in the story. It was then Vinter suddenly stopped walking. The stairs were cut off. Before I knew it, down the stairs a deep dark cave path followed. I could see that we almost had arrived and that there was a rare door lamp hanging. A cool fishy wind blew over there. It was much brighter than the stairs that were completely dark, but felt much more dangerous and ominous. It was a Vinter that moved first. I followed him into the aisle with no time to prepare my mind. Moving at a hasty pace, the empty space spouted out. I have to stop everything they do, lady, a voice of desperation as if pleading. I asked carefully because I felt a sense of incompatibility with the mission of Vinter, which did not come out of normal mode. What happens when Layla resurrects? Even the wizards that fight Layla that had been sealed to the removed world when released, the end of the world will come. It was then suddenly all the lights hanging in the cave went out. The darkness of the Sakaman has come. What's going on, boo? Give me a light. I was taken aback and looked for Vinter, but it was strange. In a flash, he took out his cane and turned on the light, but there was no news. Hey. I swiveled around to the place where Vinter had just been, but I couldn't see an inch ahead. I stammered out my hand towards the darkness, reaching the fingertips. It was a cold, bumpy wall, not an arm of Vinter. I was suddenly scared. Vinter, I found the empty place, breathing in a sharp breath. I panicked and didn't even notice his original identity in my mouth. Vinter, the moment I looked around in the darkness. The bottom lighted up. I hurriedly lowered my head to the sudden light, then I opened my eyes. The necklace, a bright yellow glow was coming out of the necklace that Vinter hung for me. The necklace can detect not only toxicity but also changes in properties caused by mana. The more you shiver, the more dangerous it is, so avoid your seat immediately. His voice, which was explaining about the necklace, crossed my mind. Then it was the moment when he said it was dangerous. Lady, I could hear a faint voice calling me from the other side of the rock. Vinter, are you all right? Where are you? I think I'm trapped. They doubled the cave structure. Vinter's voice is very far away. It was as small as it could be heard. Because of him, I listened with all my strength to the wall, clinging to the wall. Well, what then? Just go straight ahead. I'll find a way. That just a little while. Suddenly the voice of Vinter fell off. Hey. I was terrified and called him wildly. After a while his voice was heard again with bad news. One-eyed, the devil is coming in. What's the situation there? It's still okay here. I turned my head suddenly to the foreign sound of piercing my ears. A grotesque sound was heard from beyond the darkness. I froze hard on the spot. Lady. Vinter called me in a hurry. At the same time, sounds rang out closer than before. The devil is here too. It was the moment I was about to inform him that the devil appeared here, too, in a quiver. With a sudden light in front of one's eyes. System, a sudden quest has been made. An agitated swarm of mana has appeared. Would you like to recite the magic spell Kill Mimol and go find Rayon? Compensation Favorability plus 5%. Leon's whereabouts except refuse. What surprised you the most in this video? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell for updates.